As soon as he was born, I felt a link with him. I didn't know what it was, had no idea what it was. There was something there. I didn't know what it was. And he always loved dinosaurs, and he loved asking me, like he would say things like, why does the world turn around or something, when he was a tiny little boy, and I was trying to, find a decent answer to that, and I couldn't. Always loved philosophy. He was funny, really funny. He was great. It was the last year of primary school. He started his walking was a bit odd, and his head started to go forward like that on his neck. His neck would go forward, and I thought, I took him to massage people and osteopaths and things, and nothing seemed to make any difference. And then my father saw him one day, my father being a GP at the time, and he said, there's something not right about Harry. There's something not right. You need to take him to a doctor. And they found that he had a thing called an astrocytoma, which is it's a tumour, and it was in his spinal cord. And it produces cysts within the subspinal cord, and what they discovered was he had some cysts in his neck, and this growth grows all the way up the spine. So you can pick it out. A boy that we know did have it picked out of his spine, but then he died of some other tumour. So it was mixed up in his spinal cord, and they did an operation eventually, and they put a shunt into the cysts in his neck. They put a stunt in, and that gave Harry some relief. And then they did radiotherapy, and it was not an easy journey. That really was not an easy time. It was like a bomb dropping in the family, just suddenly, from having 3 normal children to having one that was very ill. That was very shocking for everybody, very shocking. And I happened to bump into the specialist who was going to do the operation in the foyer of Derriford Hospital. And he said something like, I said, how long do you think Harry's going to be in the theatre tomorrow? And he said something like, it can be anything up to 24 hours. And I was like, I just could not conceive that my child could be lying in an operating theatre for up to 24 hours. It was so shocking to me. That was the worst moment, I think, and it really sunk home how bad it was. That was dreadful. It was hard. It was hard. My poor other 2 children, that I just disappeared. I look back now, and they're the ones that suffered really, because I didn't have the time for them. I suddenly had this child who was incredibly ill, and I remember thinking, I can do this. There are people doing this every day somewhere in England or the world. There are people who do this every day. They have children who are dying, who are really ill. And if they can do it, then I can do it. So it's like girding my loins in some kind of a way. And that gave me the courage to I just knew I had to face it. His friends were just fantastic. So there were 6 of them, and we called them the lads. And the key in my front door rusted into my front door. I never took it out of my front door because they would appear day and night for all the years that he was ill. So we're talking, 10 years. And they treated him like a normal, one of their peers. The place where Harry was normal and could be their equal was on the computer, on games on the computer. And the language that came out of that room, unbelievable. There was effing and blinding and shouting and so much laughter. because there was a lot of humour, you know, and a lot of piss taking of Harry, and he did it to them, and it was hilarious. Yes, he was 22 when he finally died, and it was very odd because he'd been into hospital for another procedure about a year before he died. Was it a year before? I get muddled up now. And it was obvious after he died, looking back, that they told him in hospital that he was dying. But he didn't tell us. We didn't know that. So he chose not to tell us. And I think he chose not to tell us because he wanted us to treat him as normal right up to the end of his life. So he was pretty ill. He had bladder infection after bladder infection, he really didn't look well at all. But we didn't know he was dying, and I had this weird follow-up. I went with him to see the specialist after the operation, and there was this very odd feeling in the room. You know, I couldn't put my finger on it, but I knew there was something really odd going on. And looking back, it was the fact that they knew, and Harry knew, that he was dying, but he didn't want me to know. So there was this kind of, you know, mismatching going on, and I couldn't put my finger on it, but I knew that. I said to Mike, I said, there's something really weird going on, but I didn't know what it was, or I didn't want to see what it was because it was too painful or something. And then he cooked me a meal. He cooked me a great effort, bless his heart. Him and his mates, they cooked me a meal, and it was to say thank you to me for being his mum. And it was all my favourite food, and it was such an effort. But even then, I didn't kind of put two and two together that this was his kind of, you know, thank you to me. So we decided we'd have the ceremony in the meadow, and then we'd all come home and have a cream tea in the garden, which is what Harry would have loved. So that was great. And we decided we would have a cardboard coffin, and so we kept him at home, and we had to buy an air conditioner because it was July and it was warm. So, and his friends were fantastic because we had this time of completion with Harry, and it was great. I could go in and talk to him, you know, and just complete things that weren't complete for me. And his friends, they decorated the coffin, they put messages into it, they put photographs around it, they wrote things, they wrote messages to him. They were all in there together. I could hear them laughing and remembering stories about Harry. So it was an amazing time. And then in his room they put up letters he'd written to them, and photos and images of him. So on the day of the funeral, there was all this stuff in his room. We gathered at the graveyard, and Mike drove Harry to the graveyard with the coffin in the car. We took a seat out of the car. We had a Passat, an estate car, so that the coffin just fitted in. And bizarrely, he was running out of petrol, so he had to go into the service station and get some petrol with a coffin in the car. And then before he got to the graveyard, he was desperate to pee. So he stopped the car on the side of the road, and he had to pee in the hedge with this coffin in the car. And all the time thinking Harry would love this. This would just be what Harry would love. So yes, the grief came in lumps, and the secret was to allow it, really. And I still get the odd lump, you know, not really very infrequently now. And I get moved, but the grief is basically gone, you know, and I'm left with the joy of Harry, really. And that's what moves me, actually, the emotion of the joy of it, and what the gifts that he brought me, which were so many.